welcome to Case Closed. I'm Tracy Perry, your host. We'll soon go inside an actual courtroom in the Warren District Court to look at a real small claims case in action. Under Michigan law, small claims cases may be brought by individuals seeking $3,000 in damages or less. Neither side may be represented by an attorney in small claims court, and the judge's decision is final. Now for the case of renter's remorse.
All right, this is your case. Which one of you wishes to go first?
Trying to get some monies that are due to us per our lease.
Okay.
I don't know if it would be easier just to hand you a copy of this for you
Well,
to
you
look.
can. You've given me a termination statement that shows various things that are owed, including rent, late fees, and damages. You've also given me a termination inventory checklist, and this shows the various descriptions of damages. The property was occupied apparently from March 6, 2009 to March 6th of this year.
They left at the end of December without any notice.
Okay?
How I was alerted that they were even contemplating moving out was I got a phone call from another landlord doing a background check on them.
Okay.
At that time, I called them, I'm going to say about a week before Christmas, and I had asked them what was going on, because the other landlord said they were looking to move in his house January 1st, 2012. At that time, they said, no, we're just looking. We're going to take this lease out to, the end of it. And that being said, I had asked them if, at that time, are you planning on moving? They said, yeah, we need a bigger house with the two families together now. I said, okay, I'll put up my sign up front, and I'll start advertising it now. I got a couple of months, that'd be great. And then everything was fine. Went away for the holidays, came back, they were out. I had nothing in writing. I proceeded to get someone in there as quickly as possible. I had that, they came in January 3rd, so I prorated the money back. I didn't want any more than, I had covered that month that they had vacated, so obviously they didn't move out to the 6th of January, so I lost that month because I had to clean up and show it by the time I got there. So that's the second letter, reflects that I did get someone in there so that I didn't lose the whole month of February. And then at that point, I just, we had gone 3 years with no problems. I don't know why we're doing this now, but that's the way it ended. And I just said, these are the costs, split them down the middle, save everybody's time and money going to court, and they refused it.
Now, what's the damage to the property?
Most of it's odds and ends. The biggest thing is that the grass in the back, they put a pool up, killed the grass, never replaced it, nor could they in January anyway. So I had to do that. And then obviously the final water bill, which is not damaged, but it's owed. That's one of the bigger ticket items. And then in the kitchen cabinets you see there, they had put some kind of sticky stuff on the bottom of the cabinets. It left a sticky residue that just had to be dealt with. So those are the biggest ticket items. And again, I minus the rent. I minus the deposit from all the monies owed between damages and back rent, and then prorated out the last month of their lease obligation. I was able to get someone else in there, so I didn't pursue that. And when I got to that number, I cut it in half and said, let's go on our ways. We've been together for 3 years. You've paid over the course of the 3 years, almost 3 years. Let's move on. You need a bigger house. You're happy. That's fine. I got someone else, and we'll go on. And I thought that was fair, and we went to mediation. We couldn't resolve it, so we're here today.
Well, it sounds like the renter may owe for some back rent and damages to the property, and the homeowners offered to settle for less than he felt was owed. Let's see why that offer was turned down.
In spring of 2011, our basement flooded. So I called, had pumps brought in, cleaned up the whole mess up, went out, bought stuff to sanitize because it was all, it was this thick in the basement all over the floors. So I pumped it out, I called Tony, I let him know that the basement was flooding, and he said, I'm sorry that your basement's flooding, I can't stop the water. And I just thought maybe he might send someone out to help get the water out, being that it's his home. So he didn't, so I cleaned it up, and that was fine. And then the same year, come November, which is just before Christmas, the basement flooded again. And basically in our basement is where I had the family room, so that's where my kids' games are, their Xbox, the TV, the computer, all of our belongings. I have pictures of it all from both floods. And once again, the basement flooded. Now at this point, it's my Christmas tree's floating, all my presents and my TVs, all my stuff, and that's fine, like, I understand, he didn't flood the basement.
This
but-
is last year, right?
Yeah, I have to move, I can't continue to lose my belongings, and, you know, on top of that, like I said, this is where my kids go downstairs and play. They sit down there, they hang out, it's their little area, I have pictures, you can see the TV set up, their games, their computers, you know, it's just where they play. So once again, all the raw sewage, I clean it all up, he calls, you know, did your basement flood? I respond, or text, yes. He, once again, you know, nothing. And then until I start looking for a house, of course, in December, because if it's gonna keep flooding, I can't keep staying there. I've lost 2 couches, 2 TVs, a computer, an Xbox. I can't keep losing their things. So I started looking for a house, which I did, and I did look at several, and people called to find out what kind of tenant I was, which I can understand. They were gonna call him, you know, which is fine, and I didn't necessarily let him know that I was looking yet because I wasn't sure when I was leaving, if I was leaving. I was supposed to give a 30-day notice. So after whoever called him, he called me and was very upset that someone had called him, and I'm telling me if, you know, I don't want to live in your house, then that's fine, you don't have to, I don't need to know why. Okay, well, that's fine. You know, I don't want to live here because it's flooding. I don't know what else to say. So, and from that time on, I tried to work with him and let him know, you know, we are going to be moving, and I'll let you know as soon as I know when I'm going to move that I'm moving. So I start working with him. People are coming. It's prior to Christmas. They're coming in. I'm showing the house for him. Jim's showing the house for him. I have text messages on my old phone, you know, of dates and times in December that people were coming out to look at the house. So I did try to work with him all the way through the end, right through the final walkthrough when Jim met him there to go through a walkthrough, because we thought, okay, we'll walk through, we're supposed to get a list that we can, you know, go through all this together. At that point in time, took the keys, Jim was never allowed to go in and do a final walkthrough or anything of the sort. And then, like, on the list where he has all of this information of things that are not, you know, that he had to replace, like the grass in the backyard. I lived there for 3 years, and the next door neighbors are my friends, and I visit there regularly, and the grass was never replaced, and the sod was never put in. And then, you know, the interior and the sand and the repainting of the cabinets. We're talking about 10 cabinets that I put Rubbermaid contact paper down in when I moved in. The inside of the cupboards were paint, you know, like just semi-gloss paint. So I put the contact paper down because I'm going to place my dishes on the paint. I don't want my kids eating paint. You know?
Let me ask you this, when did the basement flood the first time again?
In the spring. It was when the city of Warren, when there was like a whole 2 blocks of houses that flooded.
Spring of 2011.
Yes. And then also again in the winter of
Right.
2011, in November, just before.
Do you know why the basement flooded? Any particular reason?
The sewage came up from the ground. I know it happened to me, it happened to the neighbors.
Okay. Was there any attempt to fix that?
No, not until after I let him know that I was moving. And that's, he came in and installed some drain pipes in after Christmas.
But you were still a resident there, is that right?
Yes.
When he attempted to fix it, that was done after the second flood?
Yes.
Did he fix
After
it
the
or
first
not?
flood, I don't know, because I moved out, that's when I gave him my notice in early December and moved out in January. So I never had another rain or anything, so I don't know if it's fixed.
Well, Mr. Purpura, what about this flooding?
It flooded in May of 2011 when we got like 3 inches of rain.
Okay.
And I was known, since I owned that house, she was the only tenant that's ever been in that house for me. It's the first time it ever flooded. I did at that time do some delving, digging, and I put a couple backflow preventers on the floor drains where they were coming up.
This was after the second flood?
This was after the second one, okay? And then from that point on, I've had no problems, thank God, from even the heavy rain. So I did call the city. It's like, you know, get in line if you want to complain, but there's not a heck of a lot we can do.
Tell me about this grass for the backyard, $325.
She had a small pool that she put up.
Well, what about that, man? Did you see the picture? It looks like, to me, where you had a pool, that the grass was killed underneath it.
It was, but originally when I moved in, there was also a pool there, so I put my pool as well.
There was no pool there.
And there was never any sod put down, like I said.
Was there sod put down?
There was
Yes,
never
there
any
was.
sod put
How do you know?
My neighbor lives next door. I've lived there for 3 years, and I go there often to visit, and I can have the neighbors come in. It's never been late.
As of the
never
time
been
of
laid.
mediation, there had not been
Any
any
sod
sod
laid.
laid.
Well,
So
what
unless
was-
he laid
well, wait a
it
minute, wait, when was mediation?
last month.
Last month?
About a month
Is that true? Mr. Pepper?
What's that?
Was there sod there?
There's sod there.
When did you lay the sod?
Yeah, I got one more if you want to see this too.
Let's take a look. When did you lay the
In
sod?
the spring, I did it myself.
Do you have a picture of that?
No, I didn't. This is the tire tracks going back to the shed where they gouged into. That's also part of the sod issue.
Okay. What about the final water bill? Do you dispute that you owe that?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm just like, when we were in mediation with the sod and the grass seed, you know, when asked then if it was put down and if he had done it, he said he couldn't afford it. But now he's telling you that he did it.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
It is true.
It's not true. Here's the final water bill, Your Honor. I paid receipt for this.
Do you have a bill for the sod?
No, not with me.
But you paid,
I didn't sod the tires. I
No,
filled
but
those
just-
in, the tire trails.
let me ask you this. Do you think you owe anything?
I believe that I owe him for the 1 month rent. I also think that I owe him for my water bill. And I don't mind paying for the screens
Okay, let's total this up.
at all.
Let's
You
total
know,
this
he
up. Wait a
also
minute,
has-
just 1 second
Okay.
here. You're saying you owe the $800 for January, right? Okay,
The screens
the screen
and my water bill.
and the water bill.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
what about
he-
the late fee for January?
That's fine, yes, the late fee.
So that's $835. The screen is $40. That's $875. And you said the water bill of $225.67, right?
Right. And I have given him a $1,200 deposit
I know
when I
that.
moved in.
$5 for the missing key?
Yeah, I didn't know there was a missing key, but that's fine too.
Okay, so that's all right. $15 for the consumer's energy bill being in his name early?
I don't believe I owe that to him. I didn't do that and I didn't live there.
That's $15. The grass, you don't believe you owe, right?
No.
That's $340 then. What about the ceiling tiles and plastic light covers? We didn't talk about that.
No, I don't believe I owe for that either, because when I moved in, they weren't there, and he told me he would bring them back. I walked through that house with my sister. She witnessed it all, and he never brought them back. I can't, if they're not there, then they're not there. He never brought them back. He told me to bring them back. And, I mean, in the mechanical equipment, which is what he told me, you know, use for the basement, I put a question mark. When I did my final walkthrough, he was in the basement working. There were approximately, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 tiles missing. I can't remember exactly, but they were never put in. As long as I lived there, they were never there. And now I feel like I'm being charged for them, but they weren't there. So why should I have to put them in?
What about the repair and restaining the bay window holes?
That I do agree was mine, because my daughter pulled the curtain rod and it fell and it chipped his windowsill.
What about the kitchen cabinets?
The kitchen cabinet, I think that is, you know, after someone rents your home for 3 years and you have to paint the house, I mean, I would assume you're gonna paint the entire home before you re-rent it out after 3 years of someone living there. And if there was paint in the cupboards to begin with, I would assume if I didn't put the contact paper down, it probably would have been warped and chipped, and I
Okay,
think he would have had to have done that anyways.
that's $660 you say you do not owe. What about the ceiling tiles, plastic light covers, and fluorescent bulbs? Mr. Pooper, we haven't talked about that one.
Again, this is the commencement checklist that she signed when she came in. She does have a question mark there. Mechanicals are in reference to the AC in the furnace. She did put a question mark there, so whether she understood or not, I don't know. There was nothing written back then 3 years ago, so
But what's wrong with it when she moved out?
ceiling tiles were missing from the basement, the 2x4 ceiling tiles.
Okay.
And then fluorescent lights, like, you know, the smaller ones, like half what you have here. Some of the bulbs are gone, missing, broke, whatever. And then the plastic that covers them were broken. So I replaced, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, I don't, you know, it comes out to $70. And fluorescent bulbs are fairly expensive, so it's really not that hard to.
Well, you're saying all those lights were missing when you moved
No,
in?
not all of the lights. The basement had several lights, but like one, there was half of a light. There were no plastic tiles, and there were absolutely no tiles down there at all. My sister walked through with me. I mean, my kids, would they take the tiles down? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't remove them.
Okay, the renter admits she owes for a lot of the items, but disputes a couple of them, like the sod and some of the ceiling tiles in the basement. Let's hear from the judge and see what he has to say.
Really, the main dispute here is with the damage to the property, but I want to say a word about the rent. I think that you do owe the rent for January, and I believe at one point you did say, Ms. Mihalik, that you agreed that you did owe rent for January, but I want to elaborate on that just a little bit because we talked somewhat about the flooding in the basement, and I think there was some implication here that maybe there was some justification that the lease could have been broken because of that. And I'm convinced that that's not the case. I'm convinced that the flooding in the basement occurred not because of any structural defect in the property, but because of the problem with the sewer system as it was attached to the city. There were other houses on that block that flooded at that time. It wasn't just this house. It's true that the landlord has an implied, that there's an implied warranty in a lease whereby the landlord has to provide a house that's fit for human habitation. That would include a basement that doesn't flood. Or if it does flood, then the landlord is obligated to fix it and make sure that it doesn't flood. And arguably, if there's something wrong with the house, would be liable for any damage caused to personal belongings of the tenants. But that all assumes that there's something wrong with the house or some structural defect, and I don't think that was the case here. I don't think there's no evidence that really that I have to indicate that. There's no plumber, there's no documentation that you gave of some engineer that looked at the house to determine that there was something wrong with the basement or its structure. So I don't think this is the fault of the landlord in this case. So I don't think there's any justification legally for you to leave the house because of the flooding or any other reason. Therefore, if you leave the house before the time the lease expires, which you did in this case, you're liable to pay rent for the time that the house is not leased. And in this case, it's roughly 1 month. So I think you are responsible to pay the rent for January, $800, plus the late fee of $835. There was no legal justification to break the lease. Now we go to damages, and I'll just go through these relatively quickly. The key, $5. You sort of admitted that you didn't give the landlord the key, so you'd have to pay the $5. We have $15 for the bill being turned over to the name of the landlord early. I've got a copy of the bill here. The bill is for December 31st, 2011 to January 30th, 2012. There was a dispute about when the parties left, whether it was the first of the year or whether it was January 6th. The testimony conflicts. It's really impossible for me to tell, based just upon the testimony, when one person left, or whether the person left on January 6th or not. It's only a $15 part of the damage description here, and I'm going to find that the testimony was not sufficient to indicate that the defendant left on the 6th of January. You have the burden on that, Mr. Purpura. The testimony essentially cancels each other out, so I don't think that you're entitled to the $15. Next is the grass in the backyard. This is probably the most difficult of all, for two reasons. One, we don't have a bill to know exactly what you paid for the sod, and number two, we don't know if there was actually sod laid. The testimony conflicts there. We do know that the pool was in place in the backyard for approximately 3 years, and was never removed during the winter. So after having a pool on the grass for 3 years, there's no doubt in my mind that the grass underneath that pool is going to be killed. It's not just a question of grass being allowed to regenerate itself, or it's not a question of a little bit of touch-up work that would have to be done to get the grass to come back after 3 years. Whatever's underneath that pool is going to be gone. And you could have put the pool there as you did, Ms. Mihalik, but then you are liable for any damage that you were caused by that. That goes beyond wear and tear. You're still leasing the property. It's not yours. You have the right, you have the duty to more or less keep the property in a reasonable condition, except for normal wear and tear. This isn't normal wear and tear. This goes beyond that. So the choice you essentially have to make is, if you want to have a pool, then be prepared to pay for any damage caused by the pool being there, which is what happened here. So I think you're liable to pay the cost to restore that grass to a normal condition. And here again, the testimony conflicts as to whether that was done by way of sod or whether it was done by way of seeding grass. And in this instance, I find the testimony of the plaintiff, in this case, Mr. Purport, to be convincing. I think the condition of that ground, really, underneath the pool was such that the only way to fix it would have been to sod it instead of just putting seed there. And it's natural to assume that a landlord who wants to keep his property up, and I think Mr. Purport does fit in that category, would have to sod that area instead of just put seed. And I'm convinced that $325 is a reasonable amount, even though we don't have a bill for what it would have cost to sod that area. Sod is not cheap, we know that. And so I think that that's reasonable, and so I will allow that. Next is the final water bill of $225.67. That's conceded that you owe Ms. Mihalik, so I don't need to spend too much time on that. The door screens of $40 is conceded by you as well. We do have the $70 for the ceiling tiles, plastic light covers, and fluorescent bulbs. That's $70. That is in dispute. It's hard to resolve also because the testimony conflicts. I do have some pictures, but pictures were taken after the tenant moved out. Your testimony, Ms. Mihalik, is that these problems basically existed before you moved in. Again, it's difficult for me to tell, but there's nothing on the checklist that you filled out at the beginning of the tenancy to indicate that that was a problem. It just is silent on that. And so my assumption would be that there was no problem with things such as the fluorescent bulbs, the light covers, or ceiling tiles. Otherwise, they would have been on this commencement inventory checklist, and they're not. So that's testimony, at least, or evidence in my mind, that those problems didn't exist at the beginning, therefore entitling the landlord to be compensated for that. And I think $70 is a reasonable amount. It's not certainly excessive. The $50 for the repair of the bay window holes, I believe you conceded as well. So I will allow that. And then we get to another big issue, which is the $250 for repairing the interior of the kitchen cabinets. I think, first of all, that we're going beyond natural wear and tear to the kitchen cabinets when the kitchen cabinets look the way they do on these pictures. I understand, ma'am, why you put the paper down on the kitchen cabinets where the dishes and other things are to keep it clean. It's not an unusual thing to do. But once you pull that paper up and the cabinets look the way they do in these pictures, and I would expect the cabinets to look this way, you go beyond wear and tear because these cabinets don't look too good, and they don't look very inviting to a person who might move in and live here. So I think that it is within Mr. Purport's legitimate business to fix these and charge something for it because, as I said, these cabinets look pretty bad, and it's something that would be beyond normal wear and tear. However, I don't think he's entitled to the full $250. He didn't employ someone to do this work. He did it on his own. To some extent, you have to say that if you are a landlord, you're going to be putting in time to fix up houses after a tenant moves out. That's part of the business of being a landlord. And the time that you put in to fix up the house after somebody moves out isn't really something that normally that you can bill to the landlord if you're doing it yourself. Now, if you pay someone to do it, that's something else. But if the landlord is doing it himself, he really isn't, I don't think, in my mind, allowed to charge for that. He is allowed to charge for any direct costs he has to fix up something like cabinets, which would be the paint in this case. But the labor was his own, and I asked what type of a job he had. He said he worked in the insurance business. There's no direct testimony that he lost business as a result of this, and I know that's hard to say for sure because when you're not in your office, who knows what could happen. but it's not as if he was an hourly employee and could say that because he spent 2 hours sanding these kitchen cabinets, he lost 2 hours worth of work, which is measurable. We don't have that in this instance, and my suspicion is he probably didn't lose any work in the insurance company because of this. So his only out-of-pocket cost to fix these cabinets would be the cost of the paint, which would be about $50 if I remember his testimony. So I'm going to allow $50 for that. And adding all of this up, then, the plaintiff is still going to be entitled to a judgment, but not in the amount that he asked for. It might actually be close to what he tried to settle the case for. If we subtract out the $15 and the $200 for the fee charged to repair the kitchen cabinets, we have $215 to be taken off from the judgment that I've taken out. That would leave a balance of $446.67. So I will award a judgment in that amount. Plus court costs consisting of a $65 filing fee and a $52 service fee, bringing the total amount of the judgment to $563.67.
Well, it's judgment for the plaintiff, and the amount is for more than he had originally offered to settle. One of the lessons here is really be diligent about filling that pre-rental paperwork out. Note every single problem. If you find you're involved in a dispute that you can't resolve, small claims court may be the answer. Thanks for watching Case Closed. I'm Tracy Perry.